Hello, my name is Jonathan Hart and I'm the Superintendent of Schools in Reddington Township. As we continue to navigate these uncharted waters, educating students in a global pandemic, we have come to learn much. The purpose of this video is to articulate how we've put our Reddington Ready Restart Plan into action. It will give viewers a first-hand look at some of the procedures in our classrooms while also providing clarity to many of our protocols. This video includes 3 primary parts. First, we'll walk through a typical classroom. 2, we'll see some pictures of safety measures from around the district. And 3, you'll receive some details about safety precautions, including contact tracing, the involvement of the Department of Health, HIPAA guidelines, and much more. We begin with a walkthrough of Hollenbrook School. We'll take you to a 5th grade classroom where you can see some safety measures in action. Thank you. We hope you enjoy this video. We begin our video with a walk through a classroom here at Hollenbrook School. You'll notice in this classroom there is a lot of different materials around for the safety and security of our staff and students. If you follow me, you'll see that we have a sanitation station set up with hand sanitizer and wipes for students to gather as they come in the room or when they leave the room. In this direction, you'll notice that the teacher does her primary instruction from behind this red demarcation line in the classroom. This is where the teacher is 6 feet from the closest student, and the smartboard is behind her and her computer is set up on her desk. Around the room, you'll see that the desks are 6 feet apart. You'll see a small group area where we have a plexiglass barrier, and over in the corner of the room we have our hand washing station for students to wash their hands when they enter a classroom. This is what a typical classroom setup looks like throughout our district. Our Hollenbrook teachers are acting as our students in this video. This is what happens when our students enter the classroom. They'll come into the classroom. As they enter, students are 6 feet apart, go to the back of the classroom, and we start each one of our days with hand washing. Remember the demarcation line that's in the classroom, which is the red line. The teacher does the majority of her instruction here by the smartboard, and she also has her computer here at her desk. On occasion, we know that students have questions. When the teacher goes across the red line and crosses into the classroom, she now knows that she's within 6 feet of a student who may have a question. This is the time when teachers and students must remember how long they are within 6 feet of another person. When the teacher is here helping a student, she must be mindful of how long she's here conferencing or talking with a student. If students are going to turn and talk to one another within 6 feet, they have to be mindful of how long that happens. So anytime a teacher is here behind this red demarcation line, we know that she's 6 feet from any student. We know that students are 6 feet apart in the classroom as well. This is important to remember when we have to do contact tracing through the Department of Health. Our classrooms are also set up with stations for small group instruction. The small group instruction station has a plexiglass barrier for when the teacher meets individually with a student. A student can walk over to the small group instruction area, take a seat on the other side of the plexiglass, and this provides an additional barrier between the student and the teacher. Again, we're within 6 feet, so we want to be mindful of how long we conference with one another. lesson is over and it's time for students to dismiss a room, they leave the room column by column, starting with the first column, grabbing hand sanitizer on the way out. So go ahead, Meryl. The teacher will monitor to ensure the best she can that students are 6 feet apart. They grab hand sanitizer and exit the classroom. This is just an illustration of what a couple of minutes of a school day looks like. We want to thank our Hollenbrook teachers for volunteering, and thank you for watching the video. The name of this presentation is Close Contacts, Quarantine, HIPAA, Baseline Health. What does it all mean in an era of COVID-19? What this presentation is really intended to do is take what we developed as our plan back over the summer, and now that we're in school and living our plan, it's about the things that we've learned in our implementation of our Reddington Ready plan. So tonight we're going to talk about these topics in a little bit more detail and some of the things that we've done to take our plan from theory and to then put it into practice in our schools. So tonight we'll review the following topics. We're going to talk about some various precautions being taken in school, and I'll show you some pictures of the precautions in schools. What are the risk factors? We'll talk about close contacts and household contacts, defining those key terms. We'll go into more detail about a 14-day quarantine and under what circumstances can a quarantine end. We'll review HIPAA and when information can be shared. We'll talk about contact tracing, which is really woven throughout the presentation when we talk about close contacts and household contacts. And for the staff, we'll focus on reporting to work or school and for students too, and what this federal FFCRA law is designed for our employees, or how it was designed for our employees. So first, some of these pictures are a review, some of them are updated a little bit. This just shows a sample of main offices in our buildings, just pictures that I was able to take in my travels throughout the buildings. So you'll see that all of our main offices are outfitted with some sort of plexiglass barrier between the office staff and any visitors that do come in the office. One of the offices is decorated for the fall. So these are some safety measures that are in classrooms, and some of the pictures we had taken prior to school opening. So some of these pictures are actually updated. So the top left-hand corner shows you a teacher's station in her classroom. And two things I want to point out about what we have available for teachers in their stations. So first, you'll see on the floor, there's a red demarcation line. That red line lets the teacher know when she's behind that line, she is 6 feet away from the closest student in her classroom. When she goes across that line to, let's say, assist a student or talk with a student or meet a student, that's her indication so that she knows that she's moved across that line and now she's within 6 feet. That 6 foot distance becomes important when we talk about contact tracing. You'll also notice at the teacher station that she has her set up behind a movable, foldable plexiglass barrier that can go with her to that station or to a table. And that's the station where she has her computer set up, where she does her simultaneous virtual learning for students at home. And from there is where she can also interact with students who are in her classroom. The picture below it is kind of hard to see, but there's a type of plexiglass that we purchased for small group instruction areas. And that picture demonstrates what a teacher's station may look like if she's meeting with a small group. So the teacher would be on one side of a plexiglass barrier and a student would be on the other side. And we're explaining to teachers to meet with small groups, likely no more than 2 students at a time, and use their barriers to separate themselves from the students and the students from each other, and to ensure they monitor that these small group meetings happen in short durations of time. Again, back to the contact tracing and the amount of time you're with students. The middle picture shows a middle school classroom, desks 6 feet apart, and the upper right picture shows the same thing, desks 6 feet apart. It's difficult to see in these pictures, but you'll see that there is a small mark on the floor that shows you where the desk's feet should be in order to keep the desks in the position so that they're 6 feet apart. You'll also notice in the top right position, you'll see some color-coded cards on the desks, and that's something that the teachers use, on their A day, B day rotation. And the bottom right picture in the classroom shows a diverter to divert the air in an interior classroom so that the air isn't blowing across the classroom. The air is actually being diverted up so that it falls gently down the classroom, as to avoid having aerosols move across the room, or air move across the room, thus carrying aerosols. The board has likely seen these pictures before, some safety measures on the bus, hand sanitizer on the bus, as well as, which is on the left-hand or right-hand side, excuse me, as well as some additional masks in case a student, has a mask mishap at the school bus stop. And then on the other side, the left-hand side, the big orange container is our electrostatic sprayer, which is used in between runs, as well as wipes to wipe down the seats of the bus. So when we talk about all of these safety measures, we know that, educating students in a pandemic does have some inherent risk. And as we know as a district, we've had 2 positive cases, one particular school that we let our community know about. But the question becomes, once a positive case is identified, what happens, right? What does close contact mean, or what does contact tracing mean? So this is a really nice graphic from the Department of Health. And at the top, it talks about the definitions of close contact, quarantine, and isolation. And we have another slide to talk about them. I do want to point out that the definition of close contact on this slide is an individual who is within 6 feet of an infected person for at least 15 minutes. The CDC has updated that to be within 15 cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period. So that's the definition of close contact when the Department of Health is doing contact tracing. Quarantine is keeping someone who might have been exposed to COVID-19 away from others. And isolation keeps someone with COVID-19 away from others, even in their own home. And we'll talk about what it means to have a positive case in a home. So moving from my left to right, person A is the positive case. They've tested positive for COVID-19. It's determined through contact tracing, and contact tracing involves an interview with the Department of Health, that person A was in contact with person B, meaning they met the definition of being within person B, which is within 6 feet for at least 15 cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period. So person A must isolate themselves from others. So quarantine, meaning not coming to work, but also isolation, meaning identify a place in their home where they can isolate themselves from family members. So person A is quarantined from school and isolated in the home, hopefully from others. So person B is the person that's doing some thinking there, wondering, well, am I at risk? Well, the Department of Health has determined that a close contact, coming in contact with someone for within 6 feet for 15 cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period or more, may have a medium risk. Therefore, person B is quarantined. They must stay at home, practice social distancing, and monitor their symptoms for 14 days. Now, the question becomes, person C, right? They're the contact of the contact. They may be someone in the household who's living with person B. They may be someone who was in contact with a close contact. In other words, they weren't in direct contact with person A, but they have contact with person B. So what does it mean for them? So person B was not in close contact. They are a contact of the close contact. They have no restrictions unless, and here's the caveat, unless person B, the person who they've had a close contact with, develops symptoms or tests positive for COVID-19. So person C is not at any increased risk unless person B develops symptoms or tests positive for COVID-19. So there's often that question of staff members may ask, well, if there's a positive case in the family, a parent tests positive, well, that means students may have been coming to school. They're the contact, right? They are the close contact. They're person B, is the students that come into school. Well, the teacher who comes in contact with that student is person C. There's no restrictions on that teacher unless we find out from the Department of Health that person B has developed symptoms or tested positive, and then we would contact the teacher or person C. So once you're in quarantine or you're a close contact, what happens? So the Department of Health has put together these guidelines for us. So the easiest thing to remember is stay at home, practice social distancing, monitor for your symptoms. Do all of the appropriate hygiene that we've been encouraging staff, students, and families to do over the course of our time battling COVID-19, which is make sure you wash your hands and use hand sanitizer as well. When it comes to testing, the Department of Health says, well, if you are person B, right, you've come in close contact, that's really up to you and your doctor. You may want to for some sort of peace of mind, and that's something that you would need to talk to your doctor about. The key with when you're in quarantine and you've been identified as a close contact, the true key is really to monitor your symptoms. If you develop symptoms, that's when you definitely want to have a test, and that's when you certainly want to contact your doctor. If you don't develop symptoms, you can come out of quarantine after 14 days. So one of the questions we sometimes get is, can I get tested while I'm in quarantine? Yes, you can. But I would only recommend, and the CDC only recommends, and the Department of Health only recommends that you do that in conversation with your doctor. The Department of Health also says that if you are identified as that close contact, you should wait 3 to 5 days after your potential exposure to then get tested for COVID-19. And then finally, if you get tested and you're negative, does that mean you can get to come out of quarantine earlier than 14 days? And the answer to that is no. So the Department of Health says that COVID-19 takes an average of 5 days for symptoms to develop, but it could take up to 14. So yes, 5 days is probably the day that you want to get tested after you've come in contact with someone, but symptoms may not develop until 14 days. So you want to give yourself that longevity of that 14-day quarantine to ensure that you are healthy and can return to work and can return to daily life. So make sure that you stay at home, wear your mask, maintain social distancing, and ensure you stay home for those 14 days and you cannot test out of quarantine. So close contact versus household contact, and quarantine versus isolation. So close contact, the definition, like I mentioned before, is when you're within 6 feet of an individual who tests positive for COVID-19 for 15 cumulative minutes over a 24-hour period, which is the new CDC definition. I've also come to understand through contact tracing, the Department of Health is still talking about a lower bar, which is 10 minutes. So based off of their interview with someone, they may also ask about a 10-minute bar too. This is the official CDC definition, but the Department of Health in New Jersey is also asking some questions about 10 minutes worth of exposure as well. Our household contact is a close contact, but in the household. So that's when the positive case is in the household. Let's say it's a parent in the household. That positive COVID-19 case is recommended to isolate and avoid any contact with other members of the household. And here's why. When that household member becomes COVID positive, all of those close contacts that live within the household are under a 14-day quarantine, but they're under that 14-day quarantine after their last exposure with the household contact. Meaning, if a person develops COVID-19, a parent in a household develops COVID-19, let's say, for example, and on day one, that parent isolates him or herself from the rest of the family, the 14-day clock starts. But let's say on day 5, the parent has to come out of quarantine and has close contact with the children because the parent has to make them dinner, the parent has to drive the children to a doctor's appointment or something like that. The 14-day clock starts again. So it's the date of which your last contact is with the close contact in the household or the household contact. So this could be within the 10-day period that the positive person has to isolate themselves. And if on day 10, the household members are in contact with that positive case, that might mean another 14 days beyond. So what's the difference between quarantine and isolation? So quarantine is staying away from others. The 14-day quarantine is necessary for close contacts. Isolation, and that's not going out to the grocery store, going to school. Isolation is what happens within the home. So that is keeping someone within the home away from the others that are also in the home, in a separate room, in a separate space, so that there is no household contact, meaning no close contact within the home. And then this is posted on the BOE website and will be posted on our homepage. There is a nice quick CDC video about household contacts and close contacts. So when a positive case is developed, we have to remember that we're guided by HIPAA, and this is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. These are national standards that protect sensitive patient health information from being disclosed without the patient's consent or knowledge. What HIPAA does is it restricts the school district from disclosing any medical information about a staff member or a student. And I have to say, with the cases that we've had in our schools, I have to say our school community really does respect the HIPAA laws, meaning our schools really do understand, and our parents and our community really understood that there's a limitation to what we can share. When we do this, we will send letters out to the school community regarding positive COVID-19 cases, but we will have to put limited information about these cases. In other words, the community, the school should not necessarily expect to be able to identify the staff members' grade level, what they teach, whether they were here on certain days or other days, whether they have a specific type of schedule, or even their name. We're only able to say that we have a positive case in schools. We can identify those positive cases as a staff member or a student and give at least a little bit of information and let you know if they're an A day or B day student. But other than that, we really can't disclose anything. So then beyond that, if there's a positive case at school, what will you know? So the first reminder is, remember HIPAA first. We can only share what we're authorized to share by the federal government. If a positive case is discovered in school or on the school bus, staff and parents will be notified with a letter from my office letting them know that there has been a positive case in school. This usually happens once contact tracing is either complete or nearly complete. You have to remember that sometimes contact tracing might be complete within the school setting, but if it's a student, that student may have had interactions with others outside of school, at a sporting event, at a club, at Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or something like that, perhaps after school. So although maybe the school will send notice out to staff and parents that contact tracing is nearly complete, there may be others that are contacted within school, but it's completely unrelated to any transmission within our school. The building staff and the parents of the building or the bus where the positive case appears will be notified. So we have in the past sent it out to just the school and just the community where the positive case occurs. If there is a positive case and the child is riding the bus, I imagine sending letters out to our larger school community because of the potential that perhaps more folks may need to know that that a positive case was identified and the child traveled on the school bus. So when will you know more beyond these two things? Teachers and staff may need to assist with contact tracing. So we've had staff members that took place, were part of the contact tracing and were questioned about their whereabouts and their contact with children. If you come in close contact with the positive case, you may be contacted even outside of the school. So parents, other students may be contacted by the health department independent of the school based off of an event after school, a Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or a sporting event. And you may be contacted by the health department for some other reason. So that's when you may know more information. If you are somehow closely related to a positive case at school, you'll find out more. So staying at home, when should I stay home? We talked about quarantine a little bit, but here are some specific circumstances about staying at home. If you are a positive COVID-19 case, stay at home. If you have come in close contact or if you are a household contact of someone who is a positive case, you have to stay at home. If you were experiencing symptoms listed on our insurance checklist, so both staff and students have an insurance checklist they fill out in the morning before they come to work. If you're experiencing those symptoms, you should stay home. And don't forget, for staff members, they should also contact their building principal or their direct supervisor if they are staying home. This is where it's important to remember your baseline health. The school nurses have created a video. They have sent out notification to the staff. We have sent out letters to parents saying, just consider, parents, your child's health. Staff, consider your own health, right? If you wake up in the morning and you happen to be fatigued, but you recognize that you were up late the night before, maybe you were at a board meeting or something like that, and you're a little tired, well, that might be your normal baseline for the day after a board meeting. If it's Friday morning and you're getting up and you're like, wow, it's been a really long week and you're a little fatigued, that might be your normal baseline. So if you're a parent or if you're a staff member, when filling out those assurance checklists, you want to keep in mind what you know about your body or what you know about your child's body and their physical health when filling out that form. If you're advised by your physician or the Department of Health to quarantine, or simply stay home while contact tracing is underway. So your physician may say you really need to stay home based off of certain characteristics that you've discussed with your physician. The Department of Health may tell you to quarantine, or they may say stay home while contact tracing is underway because we may need you to be at home because you might be at medium risk. If you're a close contact of someone who's developed symptoms and was identified as a close contact, go back to that graphic. This means if you are person C, right, and person B has now developed symptoms, you should stay at home and get yourself tested. And then finally, if you've traveled to a restricted state or country of high transmission, the New Jersey Department of Health updates their list all the time. I want to say that there were quite a few states on the list when I checked today. I want to say approximately 40 states or regions on the list today. If you travel to one of those regions, you need to quarantine for 14 days. These are places that have been identified as places of high transmission. Staying home, I think I should stay home, but I'm not quite sure. So there are certain circumstances that may seem like you should stay home, but you actually don't need to. So remember, if you've come in contact with someone who is quarantined, you don't necessarily need to stay home. There's no restriction on person C. Remember, person C has no restrictions because they're a close contact of a close contact. But remember, if you're in touch with person B and they develop symptoms, that's your trigger to then stay home. If you've been in contact with someone who's asymptomatic but awaiting test results, so if remember, person B is not symptomatic, and you know that they are the close contact and you've been in touch with them, remember, you don't need to quarantine if you've been in contact with someone who's asymptomatic but awaiting test results. Of course, talk to your doctor, call the Department of Health, and if they tell you otherwise, follow the doctor's orders or the direction from the Department of Health. Baseline health, we talked about this briefly. It's the COVID-19 assurance form that staff members and students fill out. So here are some guidelines for you, some more specifics. The questions are asking you to judge your health based off of your personal baseline. Baseline is what you know about your day-to-day health. If you experience certain symptoms on a regular basis, like an asthma cough, this is your baseline. If your cough has changed, that's something that maybe you need to talk to your healthcare provider about. If these symptoms are not your personal baseline, stay at home, follow up with your physician. So for staff, absences and ASOP. So there are a lot of different scenarios for staff when it comes to either being able to work remotely or when you need to quarantine. So scenario number one is if a staff member is quarantined for 14 days and can work remotely. Remember, if you're quarantined, you've contacted your direct supervisor and said, I've been identified as a close contact, I have to quarantine. I can work remotely. Are you okay with that? What should I do? You enter the absence as other in ASOP and you obtain a sub as needed. If the staff member is quarantined for 14 days and cannot work remotely, so there are instances where there is some type of work here in the district where staff members are unable to work remotely. When they need to take off, they need to take off. Enter the absence as other in ASOP, attain a sub if it's needed, contact Doreen in my office because she will make available for you those FFCRA and emergency paid sick leave days that you're entitled to use during quarantine. If you're ill, meaning you're having symptoms, but you're well enough to work remotely, same thing with students. If they are ill and are going to stay home, they can work remotely. The staff would enter their absence into ASOP. Students would simply stay home and let the main office know that the child is staying home today, but they're still able to participate remotely. If a staff member is ill and unable to work, put your absence in as sick in ASOP and then obtain a sub as needed. If later we find out that it's COVID related, we can then go back and apply those emergency paid sick leaves that staff members are entitled to. And finally, what is FFCRA for the staff? This is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and it provides protections under federal law. It's actually an extension of FMLA, federal law. So it can be used in two specific scenarios: caring for others. So this is used when caring for a child whose school is closed due to COVID-19 or caring for someone who's fallen ill and you have to care for them because of COVID-19. And then some kind of personal hardship. If the employee is subject to a quarantine, is unable to work, or if the employee is experiencing symptoms, waiting for a diagnosis of COVID-19 and cannot work remotely, they're entitled to these days and entitled to those emergency paid sick leave act days that we have here in New Jersey. The Reddington Ready Plan does have more complete information. My office has a lot more information and has become really well versed in the types of leaves that are available to staff. So if you need to, please reach out. And finally, I'll just say thank you. And I'll reiterate once again that as we've taken our plan from the summer and we've started to implement it and we're living it, we're coming up with all of these what if scenarios that now we are actually implementing. So this presentation will be part of a greater presentation and a video that we can push out to the staff, as well as to parents in our community, to make sure that we give these reminders about what it's like to come to school and not come to school, work, or attend school as a student during COVID-19. This simply is a presentation to provide understanding and clarity for school and families. Remember, I am certainly not the authority on medical issues and COVID-19. Please, if you have any questions, you can consult your physician or the Department of Health for more information.